on. Hold on. It's supposed to be all right. Cool. Jansen Harris here with the Combat Sports Podcast. We're presented by Got Skills Pro and Sox. Joining me is Damian Adams from The Real Deal with Damian Adams. And first of all, thank you for coming on. You know your boxing, period. I don't care what nobody says. Like, real talk, I'll go watch your tweets, your reaction, your videos, because I know you're committed to giving the best takes, and that's just real. You don't care about popularity. You don't care about this, and that. And we know how boxing could be. Sometimes boxing, a lot of popular guys, a lot of smoke and mirrors, not a lot of substance. But saying that, man, let's get right into it. Tank Davis, 28-0, 26 KOs. What's your reaction on his knockout victory over Hector Luis Garcia?
Well, thank you so much for the kind words on the intro, man. I really appreciate that. And one of the reasons that I take it so seriously when I talk about boxing is that these fighters put so much on the line going in that ring, right? And that's something that you saw in this fight, right? It's something that you saw temporarily after the TKO. Hector Luis Garcia said he couldn't see. And some people, made fun of that, but it's something that's real. You get hit in the wrong spot, it could cause temporary blindness, and that's probably what we saw in this fight, and especially with a power hitter like a Gervonta Tank Davis, right? He might be the most powerful puncher for a lightweight that we've ever seen. And along with that power, he's a great boxer. And I think that's something that's underrated about Tank, is that he does a great job of being patient in the ring and knowing when to strike. And that's what we saw from the fourth round on. Now, I do think that Hector Luis Garcia did a great job in this fight of making Tank work. He made Tank really sit back and think. Tank couldn't just come forward and attack because Hector Luis Garcia was countering. He was going to the head and to the body. He was keeping a good distance. I think that's one thing that's really underrated in boxing, is knowing the distance that you should keep between you and your opponent. And Hector Luis Garcia did a great job of keeping Tank at distance while also being close enough to counter if Tank made a mistake. And then you saw Tank kind of turn it on in that fourth round and after that. And then when the 7th and 8th round came around, that's when you saw the damage start to really accumulate and take its toll on Hector Luis Garcia. I thought it was a really good fight while it lasted. And I think it was a great warm-up for Ryan Garcia. So I think Gervonta Tank Davis did a great job of taking the information, but we shouldn't sleep on Hector Luis Garcia. This wasn't your normal tune-up fight. This wasn't some guy that most fans don't know. This was a guy who was a Fighter of the Year candidate last year. What he did by beating Chris Colbert and by winning the title at 130. He was a Fighter of the Year candidate last year. So to have that as your tune-up bout, quote unquote, for Ryan Garcia really shows Gervonta Davis growing, right? Because I've been critical of Gervonta Davis and the selection of opponents that he's taken on. And I've been critical because I didn't think they were worthy of the spotlight of being a pay-per-view, especially someone like Rolly Romero. I didn't think Rolly Romero deserved that shot last year. So now that he's taken on this fight and Ryan Garcia in April, I'm glad we're starting to see Gervonta Tank Davis take on this approach going into 2023.
Great points. Here's my take on this, and you're exactly right. Hector Luis Garcia, and maybe you might think this is a hot take. I made a video about this before. I personally feel like if him and Ryan Garcia truly fight, personally, I think Hector Luis Garcia is a better fighter overall. Just like from the body of work, popularity-wise, of course not. But I feel like when we really think about it, and you touched on the year he had, I thought he was really accomplished. I'm like, damn, this guy's pretty good. He got some guts. Excuse my language, some balls too, man. I thought this was real ballsy taking this fight. And he took some big shots. I was shocked. He took some big shots right on the chin and was able to survive. So I give him credit for surviving 9 rounds, jumping up a weight class. But when it comes to Tank, I was impressed. I think, and you tell me, because I think it was the same way in the Rolly fight. Is he reading his opponent? Because I know there's some fans out there, maybe some of his critics are saying, why does he start so slow? Maybe, I know on the scorecards, pretty much he was winning clearly, but I didn't feel like he was winning clearly. I thought at one point those earlier rounds were going to Hector Luis Garcia. Do you think he's downloading information? I remember in the middle of the fight, I was telling my friend, this is not going to last the distance. Even though I think Hector Luis Garcia is winning rounds, it feels like Tank is feeling him out. a little bit. Do you feel like that's what just Tank does? And then he has so much power. He's like, I'm not going to play with y'all. You're not going to get the Devin Haney thing, Shakur Stevenson. You're getting knocked out. I'm going to hurt you.
Yeah.
Is that one of the, is that it?
Yeah, I think so for sure. Because like I said earlier, I think his boxing acumen is underrated. And that's what you see in the early rounds, him downloading information. Even though him and Floyd Mayweather no longer have a relationship, I do think that he was influenced by Floyd when it comes to downloading information in the ring and that boxing IQ in the ring. One fight that really stands out to me is the Leo Santa Cruz fight. He had that beautiful knockout on that counter left uppercut. He was downloading information, even though Leo Santa Cruz is punching the whole time, right? He's staying busy. That's what Leo Santa Cruz does. Very active. Even with him being active, it didn't bother Tank. He was able to still download information and know, okay, I can back you into a corner and get you to a spot where you can't move, and I can hit you with this counter uppercut. So he does a great job of downloading information. Now, I do agree with you. I was shocked to see the scorecards be that wide for Tank. I thought the first 3 rounds, I thought were Hector Garcia's clearly. And then the 4th round, that's when Tank turned it on, 4th, 5th round. But I thought that the 5th and 6th round, you could score for either one. And then 7th and 8th is when Tank took over again. I had Hector Luis Garcia hit on my scorecard going into that 9th round. Barely ahead, but ahead. And I thought that Tank was going to start to take over. If the fight went the distance, I thought Tank would take over and win those last few rounds. But it is him downloading information and showing that boxing acumen. But because his power is so great, it kind of overshadows how smart he is in the ring.
Okay. Let's transition to Jaron Boots Ennis. There's some people out there that feel like right now he is the best welterweight in the world. There's others that feel like maybe 2 years from now, 2000, maybe 25, 26, he's going to be the top guy in boxing, period. He's getting a lot more attention. A lot of people, maybe including myself, we're a little disappointed to see him go 12 rounds. Maybe we were just spoiled with all the knockouts. I did see one of your tweets that said, hey, man, you're not going to knock everybody out. Yeah. He was just boxing well. Give me your take on Jaron Boots Ennis, who did improve to 30-0, 27 KOs. I think I was just a little spoiled and just like, I want to see a knockout. I'm used to that with Boots Ennis. Elaborate on that tweet and how you felt about it.
So, yeah, the opponent that he went against was trying to survive, right? And when you're going against a guy like that, it's very hard to get the knockout. And the opponent that he went against was crafty. It was somebody who not only was trying to survive, but knew how to move around the ring. Knew how to not get stuck in a corner. So when you're dealing with somebody like that, it's going to be hard to get the knockout. But what you have to do is be patient. He did a good job being patient, scoring points, and winning rounds. He scored a shutout, right? So the thing, if you can't knock somebody out, the next best thing you could do is shut them out. Go 12 rounds to 0. And when you have the ability to both knock people out and go 12 rounds to 0 by outboxing somebody, that shows that you have the ability to win in many ways. And I think he is ready for the top of the top. Now, I don't think he's the best welterweight quite yet because he hasn't had a chance to prove it, right? It's not his fault. He hasn't had a chance to prove it quite yet. So we need to see him against, he's not going to get Errol Spence or Terrence Crawford right now, but a Keith Thurman or a Virgil Ortiz, someone like that that's at the top of that division where you could say, okay, these guys are right there at the championship peak. Keith Thurman, former champion. If he goes out there and beats a Keith Thurman, then you're like, okay, now he's ready. We should see him against Errol Spence or Terrence Crawford. If they ever fight, the winner of that or however it shakes out, if they leave the division, then maybe he becomes welterweight king at that point. But I do think that he is ready for the big time. And when you have a fighter who's, so good at knocking people out, when they do go the distance, it's shocking. Like when Tank went the distance with Isaac Cruz, right? It was like, oh, wow, he went the distance with somebody. But every once in a while, you're going to run to that person that can take your shot or the person who's just good at getting away. And in this fight, I wouldn't, blame him for not getting a knockout because the opponent didn't want to fight, right? He didn't come to win that fight. He came to survive.
Okay. Look, Jaron Boots Ennis, I think he's extremely talented. Here's the politics of boxing that's funny to me, and which I hate about new school boxing, right? So, and it's hard to tell who it is. Me personally, if we don't get Errol Spence Jr. versus Terrence Crawford for some reason, I want to see one of those guys get in there with Boots. And guess what? Let's say Boots loses the fight, right? It's for me personally, maybe I'm old school. I don't care. You feel me? I'm like, okay, you got some guts getting into the ring. Even Hector Luis Garcia, I know maybe the public doesn't view him as one of the top fighters. Look, he goes back to 130. He wins a couple more bouts, defends that belt, maybe unifies. Who knows? I don't care that he got knocked out by Tank. It happened. He has some guts to step in the ring. That's the type of boxing I want to see. Like, I would love to see a Terrence Crawford versus Jerron Boots Ennis on pay-per-view. I'm even calling for it. I know his people were like, okay, you lost your mind. And shouts to the Portaway podcast. I love those guys. I want Sean Porter to come out of retirement and watch a pay-per-view on Showtime with Jerron Boots Ennis. I like fights. And I know, here's some fights I know that's not going to happen. Keith Thurman against Jerron Boots Ennis. Because Keith Thurman's like, I want $10 million up front, baby. I need my money if I'm going to get in there with him. Now, even though I'm a fan of both Terrence Crawford, who I feel like is the best fighter in the world, I'm also a fan of Errol Spence Jr. But let me tell you this about the belts. If these guys don't start defending their belts against some of these young guys, to me, it's time to get stripped. And I just don't want to be biased. It's like there's no need for all these interim belts. I know that's the politics of boxing. They'll probably have Jerron Boots Ennis defend the interim. What is the interim IBF championship? And then I think they want Virgil Ortiz. He's going to have a secondary WBA belt. And they're going to kind of play it that way until the older guys either fight each other or move the heck on out of the division. I think that's what they're going to do. But I would love to see a young gun say, hey, my next fight is you. And I would love to see a Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence say, let's get it on. And if you lose, you lose. You win, you win. But that's the problem with boxing sometimes outside of the heavyweight division, because the heavyweights always have to meet up, I feel like, in every era. It's like you have one loss, and then we're all like, oh, you suck now. You're this, you're that. Hey, at least you got in the ring. Like the guy Ramirez lost to Bivol. Hey, I expect a little bit more from him, but look, at least he stepped up and got in the ring. At least he got in the ring. But let's talk about a guy who – let's transition to a guy – it's controversial, but he's one of those guys I talk about when we talk about a really good boxer. It's just he might not be the public guy, Mr. Popular. Boo Boo Andrade. I like him. I personally like him. Do I feel like he's the best fighter? No. He did improve to 32-0, 19 KOs. I felt like he got knocked down. I thought I don't know. I felt like it was a knockdown. You tell me how you felt about his performance, and was that a knockdown?
Yeah, his performance was great. I thought he dominated from start to finish. You could have called it a knockdown because it was a punch thrown at the same time as him tripping over the opponent's foot. The ref, it's a tough position to be in because I can see how the ref can see it and see maybe he saw the trip first before the punch. But if he saw the punch first, it should have been called a knockdown. But either way, he would have won that fight because he was winning going away. And he's somebody who I don't know why he hasn't gotten those top fights yet. And the thing is, he's not young like Boots, or he's not young like Virgil Ortiz. Like he's a little up there. He's 34 now, so he needs to get those bigger fights now. When he was at 160, I didn't understand why him and Triple G didn't happen. They're both
I never got that.
Yeah, they're both on the zone. They both have titles. Let's unify them. Let's make it happen. Or him and Jaime Magawa. Don't get me started on Jaime Magawa not fighting anybody. So when you you get to these guys and they don't fight anybody, I'm just like you. I want to see these fights happen. Jaime Magawa, I believe his record's like 40-something now. Like he has a bunch of fights. He's undefeated, but there's no names on his resume, right? His best name is Gabe Rosado, who's known for being tough, but he's got like 13 losses. So when you have that type of record and you haven't fought anybody, your legacy is just, oh, he's a guy who, racked up some wins. So we need to get these guys to understand that you can lose. Look at Manny Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao had 8 losses?
Exactly.
And he's still beloved by boxing fans because of the way he fought and the fact that he was entertaining in those fights. Now, if you get dominated, it's different, right? You mentioned Zero Ramirez. He got dominated against Bivol, but like you say, he did get in the ring and did challenge himself to try to be the best. So that's all we want to see. And if you aren't able to match up to your opponent, we still will forgive that because you gave it your best and you gave us entertainment. Right? Like, again, Manny Pacquiao gave us entertainment in all those fights that he lost. So I'm with you. I need to see Andrade against, since he's on PBC now, Charlo, Caleb Plant, maybe David Benavidez. Like, we need to see those fights happen. Like, it has to be big names. This was his introduction to 168. I get it. But now, that was just an introduction. That was the first step. Now, Caleb Plant, if Billy Joe Saunders isn't retired, get him. Like, whoever's out there at 168, and then maybe he'll get Canelo. I know Andre's been chasing Canelo forever. There's other big fights out there. Like, make the other big fights happen. You don't have to just chase one guy.
Yeah, and I know Morrell. I like him, that David Morrell kid. He looked pretty good. Unfortunately, his opponent, and I'm glad he's doing okay. He was in a coma for a little bit, but he looks good. Man, boxing politics is crazy. I wanted to ask you this before we move on to Rashidi Ellis and his future. Do you think it's more, and you watch so much boxing that I know you have an opinion on this. Is it the promoters, in your opinion, or the boxers when it comes to this whole O record thing and not taking a risk? And I say this for this reason, right? If you got a fighter, especially if they're popular in Texas, any fighter, whatever, casual people, like right now, I consider myself a WWE casual, right? So when I go to wrestling events with my nephew, I don't really know who's hot or who's not. I don't pay attention to every little thing. So I don't know really in certain ways if I'm getting my money's worth or not. I don't know what type, if the, you know how they try to get over when you're really, really focused in. So for the way I say that is this. I know a lot of casual fans just want to see a fight. They want to see somebody get beat up. Floyd was very popular with just really marketing the 0 record and the money. So fans will see, oh, guy's undefeated. He must be great. The greatest thing since sliced bread. Like a lot of those guys on Golden Boy or some of the guys on PBC or Top Rank. It's like, oh, well, see, he's undefeated. And boom, we're marketing it that way. The casual fan, especially in your hometown, you're just going to buy a ticket anyways. So do you feel like it's the promoters or is it the boxers? Maybe they don't have the heart that they used to have. Because I know even people talk about Sugar Ray Leonard and how he was like the pretty boy, the Floyd before the Floyd. But to me, not really. Because towards the end of his career. He did take some risk when he didn't have to. And I feel like he was that type of fighter. If he fought nowadays, and a lot of those guys too, if they fought nowadays, they wouldn't have to challenge themselves really at all. Maybe one fight and then call it quits when you make your money. Like Sugar Ray Leonard definitely would have been a fighter who could tiptoe around and be undefeated.
Yeah.
But how do you feel about this? Are you blaming more the boxers and the lack of heart they have? Or is it the promoter saying, slow your roll? We have a game plan for you. You lose a couple fights, your behind's getting dropped.
It's definitely a combination of both, right? I think that the promoters are getting the boxers' heads about the money they can earn. And then from there, you see boxers make the excuses not to make things happen. But for an example, with Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr., I think that's all promoters, right? Because it feels like Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford want to make this fight happen. They've been talking about it for years. They wrapped up the talks about each other. And Errol Spence had a whole thing about his mission to get all the straps and the memes about him being the Grim Reaper, the welterweight division, all that type of stuff. So he wanted to make this happen. Yeah, he wanted to make this happen. And it seems like on his side, Al Heyman and those guys didn't want to be transparent about the money, right? So Terrence was like, all right, I'm going to just go take this money from BLK Prime and beat up David Avanesian real quick, make a quick 10 million. I would do that too. Like quick 10 million. Let me go ahead and make that real quick. So I definitely get that from that standpoint. But it's different because, like you said, because boxing has become more of a niche sport and it's not as mainstream as it used to be, fighters feel like for the casual fan, they have to just promote the record, right? And maybe it is the Floyd influence as well, but people forget that Floyd, before he became Money Mayweather, had to beat Diego Corrales. He had to beat Angel Manfredi. He had to, beat all these good guys, Jose Luis Castillo. He had to beat like 5 or 6 Hall of Famers before he became Money Mayweather and took on Oscar De La Hoya. So he had to earn that spot to be there first. And I feel like fighters, they are forgetting about that part of it. So for me, I think it's a combination of both, boxer and promoter. But I would blame promoters more when it comes to fighters who want to fight each other, not making it happen. But also, when 2 boxers truly want to fight each other, even if they're on different promotions, they're going to make it happen, right? Look at Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury. 2 different promotions who seem to never work together, right? 3 fights. They wanted to fight each other. They wanted to make it happen. And then the promoters also saw, this is big money. Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, this is big money. Errol Spence Jr., Terrence Crawford is big money. Ryan Garcia, Tank Davis is big money. So I don't get why these fights aren't happening unless someone's scared, right? So we have to hold both the boxers and promoters accountable. But when it comes to the promoters, we can't believe everything they say either, because a lot of times they're full of crap when they're speaking to us, for sure.
Absolutely. I agree. Look, let's talk about this fight real quick, because I'm going to be honest with you. As a boxing fan, it was refreshing watching this bout because it had 2 different personalities. I thought Rashidi Ellis at first was pretty cocky in the beginning, timing him well. Some people I watched the fight were like, yo, Ramon Villa looks outclassed. He looks like he doesn't even want to be in there. But then it was a different story. We talk about these boxing stories. He started showing heart. He was starting to figure things out. He was starting to punish Ellis a little bit. Give me your take on that fight, because that was one of the most interesting fights of the night. That was a fight that is like, okay, boxing, this makes me feel good about boxing. Where it was like, okay,
yeah,
the guy who was supposed to get just washed, and this is like kind of another build-up fight on the card, people were saying. I know bettors didn't like this card, even though there was a lot of big names on it because of the spreads were crazy.
The odds,
but the odds were crazy. I was really encouraged by boxing seeing this. I loved it. I hope we see a rematch. Hell of a fight. What was your thoughts on it?
Yeah, great fight. And like you said, I was one of those people making jokes. I thought this was over. Like, he was dominating the first half of that fight. His speed seemed to be way too much for him. Like, because at the beginning, he sees landing 3, 4, 5 punch combinations and moving, and Villa just following him around. And then you start to see Villa just start to eat at him a little bit more, and eventually get to the point where he knocked him down twice in the 12th round. It reminded me of a fight way back in the day. This might be, before your time, since you're younger than me. Meldrick Taylor and Julio Cesar Chavez. And Meldrick Taylor's the quick one. He's super quick, all the skills in the world, and Chavez is the guy with the power. And eventually, Chavez was able to get him down. It's a famous one where the referee stopped it with 2 seconds left and shouldn't have stopped the fight, right? It reminded me of that type of bout where you have the guy who has skills but is slower with the power against the speedy guy. And I would love to see a rematch of this. I did think that Rashidi Ellis did enough to win. I thought I had him hit on my scorecards because I thought he won, I would say, the first 7, 8 rounds, and was able to navigate those, even those later rounds, still able to navigate. But the 2 knockdowns, I could see how people would have Villa ahead on the scorecards. So I wasn't mad at the decision, but I do want a rematch.
Okay. Do you think that's what's next, or do you think he entertains guys, maybe fringe contenders, maybe he sees what Ugas is doing? I know Ugas is a tricky play right here, because I feel like, I'm not trying to get too much off topic, but I feel like Ugas, and I love his personality, he does not make excuses. I feel like that really hurt him a lot. Like, not just literally the eye, but I feel like a 1.5 year layoff is coming for him, maybe 2 years. That's what I feel like is coming. I don't feel like he'll be back anytime soon, but I do feel like a guy like Jaron Ennis, Rashidi, Jaron Boots Ennis and Ellis, those are fights you guys could potentially, they can fight you guys. Do you see that happening maybe, or do you think there'll be an immediate rematch?
There should be an immediate rematch. Now, as far as with Ugas, I would love to see him against maybe a Boots Ennis. That could be another name for Boots to put to his resume and say, okay, I beat this guy, former champion. Let me get in there with the champs. Like, he needs that type of name, a Keith Thurman, a Ugas. He needs that type of name to move forward in the division. But Rashidi Ellis needs to take this rematch. He can't be scared. He has to take the rematch, because I do believe he's the better boxer. I believe that he got worn down at the end, and that Villa just continued to come forward. And all props to Villa for just being perseverant and not, standing back at all, just keeping the pressure on. So I think that they should be an immediate rematch. If Ellis wins, it's another close fight. Then maybe get a trilogy, right? And this is what we love to see. The great fights bring on these 2 and 3 fight series. So it would be one that could build both of their names up. That's another thing that fighters are missing out on, is that if you have a great fight and you lose, it still builds your name up, right? Ellis isn't really going to be hurt by this if he takes the rematch. If he's not scared and says, I want to fight this guy again, boxing fans are going to respect that and be like, okay, let's see the rematch then. It's going to build both of these guys up as far as them going forward in their career.
Absolutely. Look, we got to get you back on, man, to talk this Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson, Tank Davis, those guys in the mix. We're going to talk Ryan Garcia eventually in the future, too. How good he really is. We know the followers, we know the popularity, what his ceiling's going to look like. We got to talk more boxing, man. Thank you for coming on. Jansen Harris here with the Combat Sports Podcast, The Real Deal with Damian Adams, man. Thank you, man. Thanks for coming on. Plug anything I didn't plug. I know you're on like every podcast. You're working every day, so I know there's some I missed out on.
Man, I appreciate you for having me. I always love talking boxing with real boxing fans. So whenever you need me, man, I'm here. I truly appreciate it. So yeah, you mentioned The Real Deal with Damian Adams. That's my baby. That's the one I started with. So I do that.
Absolutely. Heart and soul, baby.
Yeah, for sure. I do that each and every week. So please go ahead and subscribe to that podcast. I talk NFL, NBA, and boxing on there. The 3rd and 3 podcast is a football podcast I do each and every Wednesday night live on Facebook. Just search 33 Podcast. You'll find it at 7 p.m. Eastern time every Wednesday night. And the GSMC Boxing Podcast is one that I do usually each and every week, sometimes 2 weeks in between episodes.
Absolutely. You heard the man. Thank you so much, man. I had a great time. Thank you for educating me on some things. I know with Boots Ennis, I was a little mad. I'm sitting there with my friend like, man, he is not ready for the big guys. I wanted to knock out quick. I was waiting for 2 rounds, man. My expectations were too high. I be tripping.
Nah, man, I appreciate it. You always educate me too as well, man. I appreciate it, man. We'll definitely do this again. I'll have you on my podcast soon, man. I will be hitting you up for sure.
Absolutely, man. You have a blessed night. Thank you, man.
All right, you too.